There is something clawing at my back, and I feel it every night. I don't know what it is, but I have not slept in over 72 hours. It started on Saturday as a dull ache. I thought that I had hurt myself somehow. I don't remember taking a tumble, but I must have at some point. I even considered other factors, such as a rogue spring in my mattress. It would not be out of the realm of possibility, since I have had the same mattress since college. They're expensive to replace, you know? But I got up in the middle of the night and I flipped it over hoping that would help. I threw my sheets down on top because I was too lazy to replace them, and I figured I would get to it in the morning. Well, morning came, and the pain was even worse. I could not get out of bed. It radiated down to my legs and made my knees quiver. Whenever I rolled onto my side, the pain sent another jab into my hips like the tip of a knife, plunging into the tender meat and grinding down to the bone. Again, I am not sure what I did to deserve this. It hurts like nothing I have ever felt. I ground my teeth and tried to force myself to sit up, but I could barely do that. Every time I tried to rise, it was like every vertebrae in my spine was being compressed and grinding against one another. I could almost hear the calcium squealing over the crackling cartilage, and then, of course, there was more pain. I fell back to my pillow with hot tears in my eyes. My hands shook as I did my best to curl inward enough to pull my limp legs back up onto the side of the bed. There was no one that I could call. I do not have family nearby or any friends who could make a quick trip to usher me to the hospital. I live a good 30 minutes outside of town, and it's about 40 to the nearest hospital. For anyone, that's a hefty round trip. Not to mention my lack of insurance, and the fact that there is no way to predict how long an ER trip could feasibly take. I thought about taking a hot bath to soothe my aches, but I knew that even if I could get down and crawl my way to the bathroom, I would probably not get back up again. The pain was so much that I could not even sleep it off. Eventually, I had to make myself crawl across the bed. Never in my life has the journey from one end of a full-size mattress to the other felt so long. I covered the distance in inches, creeping along like a marching ant over the long stem of a quivering leaf. With every tug, my back screamed, but I had no choice. My arms did the lion's share of the work getting me across, and when I finally reached the side that was closer to the door, I could have collapsed in exhaustion. Sweat broke out on my brow, streaming down the sides of my face as I pushed myself up into a seated position. I shredded every breath through my teeth. A glob of snot dangled from the cavity of my nose and smeared over my upper lip as the concentrated effort of staying upright expelled every fluid possible from my body. I was finally able to set my foot down on the other side, and it was like stepping on hot coals. I ground my teeth until my jaw hurt, and then I set the other foot down. Once both heels were on the ground, the pain was not quite as bad. It still pulsed like the heartbeat of a living creature inside the small of my back. It was as if something was nestled there, trying to pry its way free. I grabbed the dresser in front of me and finally managed to straighten, with more snot and sweat pouring from me like my whole head was a sponge being squeezed empty over a sink. My stomach roiled with nausea, but I finally stood up straight. I spent half a second swaying on my feet, one hand out to catch the dresser in case I went tumbling. As soon as I was upright, everything that I had been holding in for however many hours I had been bedridden went straight to my bladder. There was a new pain signal, although it was one that I recognized. I shuffled one foot in front of the other, heading for the bathroom with all other thoughts fleeting from my head. The world tipped a little. My vision was gray at the very edges, but I kept going. My legs kept screaming at me. My knees were hot and swollen and stiff, but I could not stop. I set eyes on the porcelain bowl, but I did not have a chance to even try and sit down. Everything came gushing out at once. Hot, dark piss that soaked through the front of my bed pants and trickled down my leg. When I looked in the mirror, I saw that it was the color of rust. New panic gripped my lungs and made it almost impossible to breathe. Am I bleeding? I shoved my pants down my hips and let them fall to the floor, dragging my boxers with them. The inside of my thighs were streaked with watery pink rivulets of shame and horror. I leaned over to grab some toilet paper, forgetting, in my panic, that I was nearly incapacitated. The pain stabbed me again in the side, and I cried out, even though no one could hear me. The pitiful sound just ripped its way out of my throat, and I crumbled. I think I hit my head on the toilet. It made a sound like a walnut being split. The world went from gray to black, and I don't know how long I was like that. When I woke up, there was more blood. It stuck to the side of my face and adhered my cheek and temple to the bathroom tile. A groan rattled its way up my throat as I peeled my head back. The congealed blood made a sucking sound like a feeding parasite being ripped away from my skin. I touched my cheek to brush off some of the flakes. I felt my head for the wound, but in the mass of matted curls, I could not find it. At that point, I wanted a shower more than ever, even though I knew for sure that a shower was impossible. I needed to call someone. I didn't even know what time it was. My phone was plugged into its charger on the other side of the bed, the one that I had crawled away from, thinking that I could accomplish something. I just wanted to be back in that old, worn spot underneath a pile of blankets. I did not care if I ever moved again. I just wanted some relief. Maybe the rogue spring would pierce through the padding, stab me in the pancreas, and kill me. That would have been preferable. I managed to roll over onto my back and then onto the side where I wasn't bleeding from my head. The textured water stains on the popcorn ceiling circled my vision and made me nauseous again. I found myself facing the bottom of the full-length mirror that stands across from my shower. I never liked that it was there, but I was not responsible for the design. I am not an architect. The sight of my own face startled me enough to yell. Even then, probably only 12 hours in, I looked like hell. There were dark circles under my eyes, and my lips were dry and torn apart from where I'd been peeling back the skin with my teeth. There was blood on my teeth and on my chin, and white flakes of snot on my upper lip and pushed into the corners of my mouth. My nose looked red and dry, and all my blonde curls were the color of groundwater and absolutely caked with blood. The sight of myself laying on the floor, naked, covered in piss and slime, was enough to make my teeth start chattering. I swallowed hard and just laid there for a minute, staring at myself, wondering what I had done to deserve being in this much pain. And as I lay there, completely immobile while confronting my own mortality, the walls turned yellow and then red. The sun was setting outside of the little half-circle window above my shower, and soon the room would be cast into complete darkness. I had to get to my phone. I had to call for help. At this point, I needed an ambulance. I couldn't afford it, but that was a problem for later. I closed my eyes again. I was tired of looking at my own chattering teeth and dry, leaking mouth. When I opened them up again, my lids scraped like sandpaper, and more tears eked out of the corners of my eyes. I sniffled and hawked, but nothing came up, and everything around me was completely black. I shifted. I tried to push myself up onto my elbow, but the pain was worse than before. I could not even raise a knee without waves of agony knocking into my ribs. My entire body was being consumed by the hurt. I cried out again. My body trembled violently and my feet spasmed. I tried to lay as still as I could, but I felt my own snot leaking down the back of my throat, and it made me cough. The cough racked my entire body, and the pain was so intense that I screamed. Something else caught my attention then. Something else was in the mirror. I thought that I had to be seeing things. It looked like a pair of purple eyes, as fine as laser points and as bright as black lights, drifting through the endless, inky space that surrounded me. I spent a moment paralyzed, watching them drift up and down, bobbing back and forth, but never too far away from their original place. Those eyes looked up at me again, and for half a second, I expected them to blink out of existence. Like anything else you catch out of the corner of your eye, especially when you are delirious, I thought they might just slip away. They did not leave. They did not even blink. They stayed fixed in place, hovering for a moment longer before the darkness around them split apart again. This time, the eyes were joined by two wide rows of shiny, jagged white teeth. The teeth filled the negative space like a curved grin stretching from ear to ear, and the pain in my back shot up my spine like a thread of lightning, even though I had not moved. I cried out again. My back arched a little from this sudden shock, and that just made the original ache worse. A dozen half-formed words sprang to my mouth, and I fought to gulp them down, caught between addressing what was clearly a hallucination and staying as quiet as I could despite my involuntary whimpers and wails. It watched me, unblinking and still as I writhed on the floor. It waited until I had finished, and then the smile got a little wider. Something pricked the nape of my neck, like a needle or a knife. Even in the mirror, I could not see. The hard, mean pain dragged its way down until it rested against the small of my back. And there it stopped. The eyes and the teeth vanished all at once. Meanwhile, something warm trickled down my back, and my feet were getting colder than ice blocks. I could not crawl. I could not move. I could barely see myself in the mirror, but I did not dare close my eyes either. I did not want to be asleep if that thing came to visit me again. It could not have been a hallucination. It had to be something else. No creation of the mind could do something like that. Minutes turned into hours, and my eyes were drier than before. I felt like they were going to shrivel up and roll out of my head like sad little marbles. My head pounded with pain more intense than any migraine I had ever experienced. My throat was dry. My stomach hurt almost as much as my back. I could not remember the last time I had swallowed anything that wasn't my own fear. Dawn eventually came, a warm spread of gold that heated up the bathroom tile. At first, I was grateful for the heat, but then I began to sweat again. The morning brought new colors to my attention. Dark, purple pools of blood like blackberry syrup had formed underneath me. Some of it looked congealed, while some of the puddles were too deep to solidify. My skin was blue, webs of gray veins wrapping like a noose around my throat and crawling over my face and skull like rot. The horror that I felt so deeply was not even registering on my face. I could only keep staring at my own reflection, wasting away in pain. Urine and the copper smell of blood made a potent bouquet. It was all I could smell, alongside waste, which, if I had shit myself at that point, I would not be surprised, but I had not felt it either. Sunset came again. It was dark red, the color of death. It filled the bathroom, and I watched it sink lower and lower in the mirror's reflection. Every time I blinked, my eyes felt like they were going to pop out. Even that motion was coming slower and slower. I could not tell if the pain was getting better, or if I had simply finally found some relief due to the fact that I had not moved. My neck and head still hurt, but when the darkness fell, at least I could no longer see my own mottled, distorted face. Darkness was there for a while, an unwelcome visitor making itself comfortable, before the eyes returned. They hovered behind me again, too bright to look at directly, and that evil smile followed. I don't really know how to describe it, except that it made me feel cold. It scratched at my back again. It felt like claws this time. There was a burning pain along the incision line that had been made the night before, and a finger as hard and cold as lead prodded it. My flesh parted with a wet, sucking sound, and the pain went in waves up and down my back. I wondered when I would become numb to it. when the all-consuming, constant agony would become so completely normal that it barely fazed me at all. Of course, there had been just enough relief that the pain felt fresh. I whimpered again. I could not have uttered a forsaken word if I tried. Another finger joined the first, and then a whole hand. It was as if my back was being ripped apart, and all I could do was lie there and endure it. My vision fuzzed. I hoped that I would pass out. I whimpered again, trying to push out more of a cry, but it all just came out weak and simpering in my dry, feeble throat. My tongue was beyond useless. It was like having a mouth full of cotton. And whenever I parted my lips, the only thing that came out was dirty brown fluid like runoff. It drained from the corner of my mouth like sewage being pumped out of a hole in the ground. The color coming out of my nose looked more like pus, yellow and infected. The purple light coming from the creature's eyes made it glow. My whole body jerked. I watched the teeth part with a tongue redder than a cherry and longer than a python slithered out. Something wet and flabby dropped onto its center and then got sucked back into the gaping mouth that had formed in the void. I could do nothing more than watch in fascination as it continued, its gnashing teeth, salivating with all the juices I could not produce, splattered bloody drool onto my naked side. Long strips of my skin peeled up from around my shoulders and ribs before vanishing behind those teeth like knives. And the strange thing was, I could not feel that. I could see it. I could hear it. But the pain was buried. It could have been hours or minutes. Time was lost on the bathroom floor. At one point, I caught sight of what looked like dark, clawed fingers skittering over my ribs. They were gone in a flash. I whimpered again. The sound came up like a burp and puffed out my cheeks. It made my lower back ache, but it still did not exit my mouth. At this point, I do not think that I have blinked in over 6 hours. The sun is setting outside my window and I am waiting for the darkness. There are more colors this time. My purple face, mottled black in some places, while other spots are pale like spackle dotted across my temples and chin. I looked like a bruised, molding plum. My eyes are yellow and they've got brown spots buried in the corners. They are rimmed in red and look ready to fall out. I cannot move them up or down anymore, so I have a limited view of the rest of my body. I imagine it is all a similar color. I can still smell shit and piss and blood, even though I don't remember the last time I was able to take a deep breath. There is only watching and waiting. The blood underneath me has dried, and I feel like I am glued down to the tile. Like if I tried to roll over, it would rip off my skin. Or what is left of it. There was a knock on my door earlier. I don't know who it was, and I tried to scream for help. Nothing came out, not even a moan. I didn't feel the sound, only my urgency, and the desire to push sound up my throat. I could not even manage a sharp exhale. My chest would not expand. If my muscles were not so weak, I would have choked on my own desperation. It all comes sliding out. Every fluid, every strangled cry, every last bit of hope. It's all in a puddle under my face and head, thick like sludge. It piles up like drizzling molasses. Sometimes I think I am dead, but I cannot be dead because I can still feel pain. It radiates up and down my back, throbbing and deep, too deep to massage out, too deep for medication to touch. And when I see the creature again tonight, I know that I will feel it scratching again. Its claws will dig out more pieces of me, and there is nothing I can do to stop it. I wonder if its movements are calculated, or if it is simply a slow eater. I can only hope that it is not overly intelligent, and that my suffering is just an unfortunate byproduct, rather than a malicious infliction. All I want is for it to tug the wrong organ, the right organ, and rip it out through my back, take my spine with it, wrapped in a cluster of frayed, pulsing nerves. I really just want to sleep. Thanks for listening. If you enjoy these stories, be sure to subscribe to the podcast and check out some more of my episodes here.